Hello and welcome into another episode of the Fantasy Football Forecast. I'm your host, Trevor Scott, joined by my co-host, Matt Duraldi. And today we are going to be getting into Beat the Waiver Wire going into week 2. So these are guys that we're looking at for week 3 and beyond, trying to predict who's going to be the waiver wire players that you're going to want to have going into next week. We're still looking for our subscribe goal of 750. We are almost there. So if you're new here, hit that subscribe button and let's get into it. All right. And the first guy that we're going to get into here is Bhayshul Tuten. So with the big news that Tank Bigsby was traded out of Jacksonville, that creates a big opportunity for Tuten to step into that number 2 running back role. Obviously, Etienne had a massive snap share last week, over 70% of the snaps. But without Bigsby now, Tuten should have an opportunity here to step into a workload of 5 to 8 carries and maybe 2 to 3 targets per game. And he is one of the fastest players from this past draft. And so if he's able to step into a role where he can get explosive plays, that could potentially expand his role over the season. We did see Liam Cohen use Rachaad White in a pretty effective role behind Bucky Irving over the second half of last year. And if Bhayshul Tuten kind of grows into that Rachaad White role, it's definitely going to be somebody that you want on your teams.
Tuten in dynasty circles was kind of one of the darlings of the offseason, right? And we were all thinking like, who's going to emerge out of this 3-headed backfield? And then obviously we, get a little bit more runway with the Bigsby trade. And we know that Liam Cohen, looking back to Tampa Bay, is fantastic at orchestrating a run game. We know what Bucky Irving did last season. Rachaad White had the most efficient running year of his career. Sean Tucker was over 6 yards per carry on 50 attempts. Speaking of Bucky, is like when you look at him last year, even when he took over, as kind of the main back after week 6, he still only had a 49% snap share the rest of the season. And so if Tuten can be used similarly to really either of those guys, like you mentioned, we're not projecting him to be a workhorse, but this is a guy that can backdoor his way into maybe a nice flex role during bye weeks. On the Travis Etienne side, like he looked like maybe one of the best picks of the draft week 1. I know we were all kind of playing that roulette of who should we take and when and just wait, et cetera, but he had an awesome week. But we have seen over Etienne's career him start out very hot and his efficiency going away as the season progresses, not to mention this was against Carolina. And obviously there was that one big massive role. So it'll be interesting to see kind of how this shakes out. But I definitely think Tuten at this point is worth an add because he's not somebody that you need to start right now. And if you have a deeper bench, you can afford to be a little bit patient.
Yeah, I definitely think it's going to be interesting to see how the ETN thing plays out as we move forward. Because if he's going to get 70% of the snaps, that's going to be 1, not normal for Liam Cohen, and 2, excellent for his value too, right? But this also could have been a thing in week 1 where if it had happened in week 5, we'd probably be explaining it away a little bit as, yeah, he hit a 71-yard run. Like, obviously, they're going to stick with the hot hand here. He's going to see an expanded role in a game where, he's running well on the ground and has that big explosive play. Now, if that hadn't happened, maybe there was an opportunity, to go to Tuten or to Bigsby in that week 1 game. So now there's going to be no Bigsby. Tuten is definitely somebody that I think if you have an open roster spot, he's worth throwing a dart at, especially going up against the Bengals this week. They're probably going to have to score, and hopefully he'll be out there a significantly larger amount of the snaps than he was last week. Going over to the next guy is Kareem Hunt. I'm starting this one off because this is my guy. I insisted on getting him in here. And for me, seeing him work the same exact number of touches as Isaiah Pacheco, I think was worth bringing up in this video. Obviously, he's 30. Obviously, he's not super explosive. And Matt's point was kind of, is he going to really, how much more work could he possibly get? But after the Philly matchup, I think the schedule softens quite a bit with the Giants, Baltimore, Jacksonville, Detroit, Vegas, right? And he was the better runner even once Pacheco was back last season. And he still was given, 50% of the touches compared to Pacheco. So I do think that there's an opportunity here. Nobody else touched the ball. Elijah Mitchell, no. Brashard Smith, no. So I do think it's a split backfield between these two. And if Pacheco continues to not show very well, I think that Kareem Hunt could get an expanded role moving forward.
You and I have been more out on Pacheco than really anyone that I know this entire offseason. So I'm not trying to, hype him up. And I know a lot of people really still are. And, maybe that comes to fruition. Now, a player who is exciting, who you and I both really like, is Elic Ayomanor. So you see right now his roster percentage is at 26%. So I think there's really an opportunity to see that grow if he has a solid, second week. We saw that Ward is obviously going to sling it. Ayomanor drew 7 targets in his rookie debut against about as tough a defensive matchup as you're going to face. Ayomanor, he's a smart player. He's a good run blocker. His calling card has unfortunately been he has struggled with drops in college, and we did kind of see that, between him and really the rest of the team in this matchup. Obviously, Cam Ward's dad will be the first one to tell you that. But I will say it was encouraging to see him on the field a ton. It was encouraging to see him really being the top dog with Calvin Ridley. And so I think if this is an offense that is going to be good, and, Cam Ward, if you're just kind of box score scouting, had an awful game, but I thought he actually looked pretty decent in this game. So I think if he's kind of the clear cut two in this offense, there's going to be some value in that.
Yeah, and 80% of the snaps for Ayomanor is excellent, right? Like we knew he was going to start, but seeing him immediately take on that large of a role is something you want to try and buy in quickly before the big game follows, and then you're having to spend a bunch of fab to get him. So 7 targets, again, not worried about the production at all against Denver. It's not like you started him. We're just looking for a role here, and I think that's something that he has. Now, like you mentioned, he did have a pretty bad drop, but it was on a slant where he was going to get drilled. So it's not like that would have changed changed the outcome of the game that much. And Ridley had 2 terrible drops. One in on the last drive of the game, where that would have been a first down. Going down to the next guy, we're going to talk about Kayshon Boutte in this video because although he was kind of one of the main waiver wire targets this week, his roster percentage only got to 35%. So highlighting him here again as somebody that you can get for free, likely in a lot of your leagues. And, our main concern was that he was going to get buried in the depth chart, and then he ran the most routes of anybody. So he's not getting buried in the depth chart. He is likely going to be the number 1 outside receiver for this team. And Stephon Diggs got targeted heavily on the snaps he was out there, but he only played 40% of the snaps. So and then you also have the element of him sitting in his locker saying, don't forget who I am. I was first round projected pick, right? I'm not coming out of nowhere. This isn't unexpected, right? So he also has that elite level of confidence in himself. And he was solid last year as well when he got his opportunities on the field. So overall, really like the player, and I like the situation if he's really going to be the downfield target in this offense.
Speaking to his pedigree, he was the leading receiver for LSU his freshman and sophomore season. Sophomore season was included with Malik Neighbors and Brian Thomas Jr. We know he has a 300-plus yard game in his bag, which is an SEC record. Kind of fell in the draft for injuries and various reasons, but you said it best. I mean, 82% snap share when a lot of us were kind of running toward Kyle Williams in best ball, who saw 10% snap share. And I think that will continue to grow over the course of the season. But, this is a guy who has the talent and has potentially the solid QB in Drake May. And I think it'll be interesting to see how they look this week against Miami, because Miami just made Daniel Jones look like an MVP. So I think this is a game where May can come out firing, and I kind of expect big things from Boutte this week, to be honest, and I think if that happens, we're going to see his roster percentage jump closer to 60.
Yeah, 100%. And, I think if he has a big week, like if he goes similar to what he just did with a touchdown, like I could see it really going to 100. So like just go out there and get him, because again, we're looking for roles this early in the year, and the fact that he got the 82% target share, I think, is the most important number for adding somebody to the end of your bench here.
Next guy up, Troy Franklin. So this, again, what you mentioned with looking for roles that are potentially expanding. So Franklin was the number 2 wide receiver in terms of snap share. Obviously, Cortland Sutton was the one, still only at 59%, but we saw Mims was the next guy up at 53. Pat Bryant had like a 5% snap share. And so, with Mims, I'm not really a Mims guy. He's been, kind of a weird darling this offseason just because he had a very strong last couple of weeks to the season. I think some of the best ball bros were getting a little too ahead of themselves drafting him so early. But with Franklin, it's like, it's kind of, he's kind of a head scratcher, right? Like going into last year's draft, there were some mocks that had him as a first round pick, some as a second round pick. He ends up falling to, I believe it was round 4.
Four. Yep.
And yeah, and he reunites with Bo Nix, who he obviously played with at Oregon. And last year it was bizarre because they didn't really seem to have much chemistry, to be fair. It almost seemed like they had never playing with each other. But, now looking at week 1, 6 targets, 59% snap share, if that continues to grow, and he is a talented, fast player, I think there's something to that. Now, I will say with an ad like this, kind of take it with a grain of salt. Like, this is someone who, you've got someone moving into IR, you want to take a shot. Like, every bench spot is intrinsically valuable. So don't push someone aside because you think Franklin might pop. This one is a little bit more like deeper league type stash, but there could be something there. And we see, year 2 growth all the time. So I will say with Sean Payton, some of these number 2s can be a little bit of a headache. So we'll see, but someone who at least intrigues me at this point.
Yeah, and I like the call too because last year after he dropped that touchdown on a deep ball, and then Bo Nix tried to take the blame for that, saying if I had thrown it a yard shorter, he catches it. But that kind of put him in the doghouse with the coaching staff, I think, more than Bo Nix. And then this year, we saw in the last preseason game, he goes out and absolutely lights it up for a half of football, scores twice. And that's when my ears kind of perked up on Franklin. Like, wait a second, is he going to be actually involved in the offense here? I actually drafted him in a guillotine league in like round 12 of a guillotine league. So that those are deep cuts. But I'm feeling solid about having him because, like you mentioned, second in snap share, and Bo Nix played horribly, but he still had 6 targets and 45 yards. So, and that's from Bo Nix throwing for 150 yards. So if Bo Nix kind of develops into the passer that the industry seems to think he could be, obviously you and I aren't super optimistic there, but we could see a much better total from Franklin as the volume and the passing yards start to ascend here from their week 1 matchup. So against Indy, we saw the Colts defense kind of completely shut down Miami last week. Was that Miami? Was that the Colts defense? I guess we'll find out more this week. But yeah, so I like the call here on Franklin. A deeper league guy, right? We're not just catering to the leagues where some of these top guys are owned. We want to make sure we include as many names down low as well that we like.
Jalen Royals. So this one is more of assuming he is out, just put him on IR type stash, right? So he profiled similarly to Rashee Rice coming out of college. And, he was one of those guys that you and I kind of talked about a little bit during Dynasty season where there was a lot of split consensus in the industry. And you asked me, you're like, what do you think of Royals? And I was like, I like him. What do you think? You're like, I like him too. So he's someone that maybe we're a little bit biased toward, but looking at the landscape of the Kansas City Chiefs, it's like Kelsey looked kind of cooked. Worthy could miss extended time. Hollywood hasn't been a beacon of health. And if Hollywood transitions to a downfield role once Royals is on the field before Rice gets back, and he can back his way into a decent amount of targets. But this one is a little bit tricky because you're kind of working within the time window of Rashee Rice and potentially Worthy, how much time he misses. But again, if he's out again this week, throw him on IR. It doesn't cost you anything.
I think during the draft, when Royals got picked, we both simultaneously texted each other and said, "Oh, of course the Chiefs got Royals," right? It was just like, this was the guy that I wanted to end up in Washington. This is the guy that can literally take that Deebo Samuel role, right? The close to intermediate range to the line of scrimmage. And so I thought he was a pretty natural fit there. Somebody that we both had in our top 10 receivers in this draft fell the 4th round and right into Kansas City's lap. So although they already had a Rashee Rice, there was some commentary. Why did they take somebody that plays such a similar role? And it's like, well, because they probably had a 2nd round grade on him and he's in the 4th round. So, he's super talented. Unfortunately, he got hurt, right? Like otherwise, I think we could have seen a role similar to Troy Franklin's in week 1. And with the injury to Worthy now, he would be the number 2 in the offense right now. So we'll see if and when he can get back on the field, though. I don't think it's going to be this week. So the further along it gets to, the more the Tyreek Hill rumors are going to kick up, and if that does happen, Royals isn't going to be worth much. So,
and just a thought. What's funny what you mentioned with drafting on need and Kansas City. Why did they do that? Well, ask the Tampa Bay Buccaneers drafting on need why they took Emeka Egbuka. Ask
Yeah.
the Atlanta Falcons drafting on need why they took Michael Penix, right? Like sometimes you got to do that. It's very similar to baseball where it's like you don't not draft a center fielder because you have a center fielder. Like you
Yeah.
just stockpile. And we see the Eagles do that every year and look at the success they've had. Sorry, side tangent.
Yeah, a side tangent about the NFL draft because we love the NFL draft, and we neither of us subscribe to that draft for need thing. It's like, no, dude, if you got somebody on your board that you think is way better, like you're looking 2 to 3 years down the road for this guy to have a role, right? So, anyways, that's it on Royals. I think, if you have an IR spot to play with, that he's a good ad. All right, so moving over to the defenses now. So this is my favorite part of the segment because I always want to be, if you have the roster spot to get a second defense on your bench, which a lot of leagues could have, or if you have injuries, that's a good place, I think, to spend that bench spot until your guy is back. So we're just going to be hammering this every single week. Whenever the Saints are on the schedule, that defense is going to show up. So that's this week for the Seahawks. They play the Saints in week 3. And so you should be firing them up in week 3 if you have the open roster spot on the end of your bench.
And this one's a little bit interesting too, because if you're in a deeper league and you really want to start them week 3, I think you can start them against Pittsburgh. I don't know what to think of that Pittsburgh versus New York matchup. Like, did Rodgers and Fields play over their skis in their respective revenge games, or are they legit? I don't know. We'll see what happens. But think back to a year ago when we thought the New Orleans Saints were one of the best teams in the NFL after a couple weeks. So TBD. But I do think that you might be able to start them in a pinch this week.
Yeah, in a pinch. I would not be looking to play them against Rodgers.
No. I mean, if you're in a 14-teamer and it's like them or someone that's ranked 2 spots ahead and you want them for week 3, that's what I mean.
Yeah, or you don't want to burn their extra roster spot. It makes sense. Right. Yeah. Rodgers looked awesome. And I, like you said, the revenge game might have been way too sweet for Rodgers, right? I mean, he didn't even mince words in his post-game interview. No. He said he straight up said it was sweet to beat everybody in that building. Didn't even pick out anybody. Just said everyone.
And so. I saw a tweet response to that where it's like, you mean the team that literally moved mountains for you and then gave up draft capital to bring over your best friend and did everything that you ever asked for. It's
yeah, and then they flew him across the country just to tell him we'll move it in a different direction. So that was probably their get back for that. But he just felt like he had to make a statement in week 1. So we'll see against Seattle. I guess is what we're saying, and they're at home against Seattle too. So I don't know that traveling across country playing in that playing in Pittsburgh is going to be the best thing for the Seahawks defense this week, but Saints in week 3. So I think we've talked enough about Seattle.
Next up, Indianapolis Colts. So this one intrigues me probably more than any other defense. Like you said, is it the chicken or the egg playing against Miami? But 14 fantasy points against the Dolphins, and the whole narrative going into Miami this week, was well, if they can't do it against the Colts, bad defense, who can they possibly do it against? So we'll see if the Colts are just much improved. I think Denver is actually kind of an intriguing matchup because Denver and Bo Nix obviously didn't look good against Tennessee.
Yeah, and this is the defense that I'd be more interested in using in week 2, right? I don't think that Denver started the season very well, and I think the Colts kind of took it to Tua and turned him over 3 times. So it's like, well, if Bo Nix is going to not look so good, he turned it over twice last week. Is he going to turn it over multiple times again this week? I don't think that's super far-fetched to even expect, right, from the Colts. So we kind of thought that the Colts would be a defense that we could pick on for fantasy. And I am very concerned after the first week. And I feel like after 3 weeks here, because we're looking at them for that Titans matchup, but I think they might be a solid defense, top 10 defense this week against Denver too. So against Tennessee, though, I definitely think they're going to be a very popular streamer and some fab money could come out on them for that matchup.
I would love nothing more than for them to tee up against Bo Nix. Tua and Bo Nix are my 2 least favorite quarterbacks in the league by a mile. And so if they can take it to him, whoo, baby.
Yeah, I would be very excited too. Just, hopefully the Broncos get a loss that they weren't expecting to get on the schedule there. Get a couple of those early in the year would warm my heart as a Charger fan.
RJ Harvey gets 5 touches and Twitter just burns down.
Then the last defense up is the Chiefs. They get the Giants in week 3. We'll feel a lot better about this if Russ is still starting. So this one that's why they're third, right? If it's Dart, I don't know how comfortable I feel, because it's just more of a wild card. But, if it is rookie in his first start, I think that's still a pretty solid matchup for the Chiefs. I think it's a good argument to start them. Not this week against Philly. So again, this one is specifically for week 3.
It will be very interesting to see what the Giants do. But yeah, obviously not against Philly this week.
Yeah, and then just to highlight again, this is not a defense you're going to be using after week 3 either when they get Baltimore. So this is a very niche case here, and that's why they're third.
Another guy, Jaxson Dart. So you actually mentioned him in the waiver wire show earlier this week, but this is really for Superflex specific. And you and I both had claims in for Jaxson Dart, and unfortunately we got outbid by one of our league mates. So it's interesting because obviously
clearly a listener.
Clearly, apparently, I thought he only listened to the footballer, so he's a sneaky listener. But I don't know. I mean, it was a weird vibes on the sidelines. Dable fighting with neighbors. The body language was bad with Russ, so they've semi-committed to him. But now I've seen rumors that Dable talked to ownership about potentially putting Dart in. And once those wheels are already in motion, when Dable's already on the hot seat, like the time is coming. And it's very tricky because Dallas is going to be the easiest matchup that they probably face over the next few weeks. Obviously, New Orleans,
week 5 anyways.
Yeah, until week 5. So that maybe is where we will see them put in Dart, but who knows? But Dart is someone that, I've been a huge fan of, really going back to his recruiting process when he committed to USC, and then, obviously followed him afterwards when he transferred, and he was my number 1 quarterback in this class. And what I like about him too is he runs, right? Like he's very similar, maybe not to the level of Drake May, but he's definitely like an athlete. And so he can move around, he can get you those cheap yardage, and he looked like an absolute stud in the preseason. And we know that Dable is just licking his chops to implement the play design and plan revolving around Dart. So he's someone that when he becomes available in your super flex leagues, you're going to see some big bids on QB needy teams.
Yeah, for sure. And I think the alternate point to adding him now, I wish that they would have just turned the keys over this week. Like Russ looked horrible. Okay, less than 50% completion, 4.5 per attempt. Neighbors is pissed on the sideline. Like that's like the complete antithesis of how you want to start the season. And so just making the switch now, it's just would be so clean. I feel like the fact that ownership isn't signing off on that, I think has a lot to do with the schedule that you see on the screen here. It's Dallas this week, which I think would be okay, but then Kansas City and the Chargers, then the Saints, which again would be a solid entry point, soft landing. But then I know for sure they're looking at the next month after that, where it's Philly, Denver, Philly, San Francisco. And it's like, oh, woof, are we going to just throw our rookie project to the wolves during that four game stretch? So they might be looking, management anyways, might be looking at week 10 as the entry point here, because then it's Chicago, Green Bay, Detroit. That's not an easy stretch either, but at least the defenses maybe are a little bit more gettable. Maybe we're not saying that about Green Bay here in a couple of weeks, but then New England, Washington, Minnesota, and the Raiders. So, after that month, I feel like it does ease up, although it's not an easy schedule. But, I just really hope that Dart ends up getting to start here sooner than later, because the Giants are just going to be, they're going to be 0-10. I mean, maybe they beat the Saints, so they'll be 1,
but
1 or 2-8.
1-8, 1-8 to start. I mean, do you want to be 1-8 with Russ and the fans throwing tomatoes on the field, or at least see what your young player has? I don't know.
Yeah, so we both claimed him. We both tried to claim him this week, so we're both obviously already there with Dart. If you can get him for free, do it now in your Superflex leagues. And the last guy I want to highlight here for your Superflex leagues is Mac Jones. So we got news this morning that Brock Purdy is going to miss 2 to 5 games with a turf toe-ish injury, a variant, I guess. So I had never heard that before. I don't know what's going on there yet. I'm sure we're going to get more information, but Mac Jones is going to start this week against the Saints. And I think in a Superflex league, that makes him a starter, especially if you're the Brock Purdy owner and your second quarterback was somebody, or your third quarterback was somebody like Cam Ward or Tua. right? Those guys, or I'm sure there's other
Bryce
quarterbacks too
Young,
that
yeah.
Bryce Young, like there's going to be players that he's going to get ranked ahead of. I would expect him to be a top 24 quarterback this week. And so, if you're in a position where you lost Purdy, I think he's absolutely worth the add if he's not already added in your league. It's showing 2%, but that seems like a little bit of a surprise to me. So if you have open waivers right now, go and get him in your superflex leagues, and somebody that I think you can definitely start over the next 2 to 3 weeks if he's going to be the one out there. So I missed on him in our league because, I think that he's going to be a reasonable starter. It would be him or Penix for me. And I kind of think that I would lean Mac Jones over Penix as well over the next couple of weeks. So, it's definitely somebody that I'm intrigued by, and I wish I could have got, but that you guys should absolutely be trying to add in your leagues.
It's about as easy a 3-week stretch as you can ask for as a fill-in: New Orleans, Arizona, and Jacksonville. So obviously the system is solid. Obviously, the weapons are very thin right now, but I think he should be able to game manage his way to, decent weekly totals without necessarily the variance of some of those other kind of volatile QB3s that you already mentioned.
Yeah, and I'm not sure how thin the weapons are because McCaffrey's out there, so they're just going to load him up with 16 targets, and everybody else gets a couple, and that's the offense. So McCaffrey will have 10 for 95, and Ricky Pearsall will have 3 or 4 for 85, and they'll get a couple touchdowns. Maybe Mac Jones gets a 1-yard plunge, and that's the offense.
I don't even know what McCaffrey's total yardage prop is this week, but I got to imagine it's 145 or something.
Yeah,
like
something
it's going
like
to be.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. Yeah,
I mean, shout out to everyone that had the cojones to rank him as RB1, because if he stays healthy, it's looking like a good call.
Well, if he stays healthy, we know he's going to be 1. That's never been the problem.
But you still gotta rank him that way. We didn't.
Yeah,
we had him 4.
We had him 4, I think. We didn't have the cojones to go all the way up to 1.
See?
But if you drafted him, you for sure had a stronger stomach than me, because I was not going to be drafting him.
Yeah.
The panic that ensued after he missed practice with calf was just, oh my God, the internet just burned down, like you said earlier about Twitter. That's our look at Beat the Waiver Wire going into week 2 for week 3. Thank you guys for watching.
Later.